The marble floors of Meridian Tower reflected nothing but lies. 23 years of carefully constructed wealth, power, and respectability, all of it, built on the grave of a love that refused to stay buried. When Marcus stepped through those glass doors, dirt still under his fingernails from his morning shift, he wasn't just entering Elena Whitmore's world. He was walking into the ruins of everything she'd tried so hard to forget. But some secrets have children, and some children have eyes that see straight through the walls their mothers build. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The elevator to the 42nd floor had never felt so slow. Marcus Rivera stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the numbers climb like a countdown to Judgment Day. His reflection stared back from the polished steel door-sworn Carhartt jacket over a clean white shirt, work boots that had seen 1,000 mornings like this one, calloused fingers that still trembled slightly despite his best efforts to steady them. 23 years. The doors opened with a whisper, revealing the kind of reception area that existed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of downtown Seattle, while abstract art hung on walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. Behind a marble desk that could have doubled as a small landing strip, a receptionist with perfect teeth and perfectly calculated kindness looked up. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm here to see Elena Whitmore." His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "I called yesterday." The smile never wavered, but something shifted behind her eyes. "And your name?" "Marcus Rivera." She typed something into her computer, fingers moving with the efficiency of someone who'd perfected the art of polite dismissal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rivera, but Miss Whitmore's schedule is completely booked today. Perhaps if you made an appointment..." "Tell her it's about Sophia." The typing stopped. "Just a moment." She picked up the phone, turning slightly away, her voice dropping to a murmur. Marcus couldn't make out the words, but he caught the sharp intake of breath, the quick glance in his direction, the way her knuckles went white around the receiver. "She'll see you now," she said when she hung up, and this time the smile was nowhere to be found. 42nd floor, corner office. The elevator will take you directly there." The ride up felt even slower. Elena Whitmore stood with her back to the door when Marcus entered, silhouetted against the wall of windows that made up the western wall of her office. Seattle sprawled below them like a map of everything she'd conquered: the harbor, the stadiums, the neighborhoods where normal people lived, normal lives that she'd forgotten how to understand. She was smaller than he remembered. Time had refined her in the way that money does, carving away the soft edges until what remained was all sharp lines and perfect angles. Her hair, once wild and dark, now fell in a controlled cascade of highlighted blonde. The jeans and flannel shirts of their college days had been replaced by a tailored suit that probably cost more than his truck. But when she finally turned around, her eyes were the same, dark, intelligent, afraid. "Hello, Marcus." "Elena." They stood there for a moment, 23 years stretching between them like a chasm. She gestured toward the sitting real leather chairs arranged around a glass coffee table that held nothing but a single orchid in a crystal vase. "Sit, please." He remained standing. "I tried calling first." "I know. Your assistant said you were unavailable." "I was." She moved to her desk, putting it between them like a barrier. "I'm unavailable to you, Marcus. I have been for 23 years. Even when it's about your daughter?" The word hit her like a physical blow. He saw it in the way her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, the way her perfectly composed mask slipped for just an instant. "My daughter," she said carefully, "is none of your concern." Sophia Rivera would disagree. Elena's face went white. "What did you just say?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn soft from handling, creased from being opened and closed a dozen times in the last week alone. He set it on the desk between them. "She found me," he said simply, 3 weeks ago. Walked into the garage where I work, asked if I was Marcus Rivera, father of David Rivera. He paused, watching Elena's hands shake as she stared at the paper without touching it. When I said yes, she asked if I'd ever been in love with someone named Elena Walsh. Elena's maiden name hung in the air between them like an accusation. She knew your name before you married Richard Whitmore. Before you became the Elena Whitmore who owns half of downtown Seattle. Marcus's voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. She knew about the apartment we shared on Pine Street. About the little cafe where we used to go for coffee every Sunday morning. About the night we… Stop. The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the force of 23 years of buried grief. Elena finally reached for the paper, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. It was a birth certificate. Sophia Elena Whitmore. Born June 15, 2001. Father, unknown. She had this amended, Marcus said quietly. Hired a lawyer, did one of those genetic genealogy tests, tracked down my son David through a family tree website. Smart girl. Takes after her mother. You don't know what you're talking about. She looks like you did at that age. Same eyes. Same stubborn set to her chin when she's made up her mind about something. He leaned forward slightly. Same way of tucking her hair behind her ear when she's nervous. Elena's hand froze halfway to her face. She wants to meet you, Elena. Her real mother. Not the woman who's been pretending to be her mother for the last 23 years. I am her real mother. Elena's voice was sharp now, defensive. I gave birth to her. I raised her. You gave birth to her and then you gave her away. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Elena sank into her chair, the fight suddenly gone out of her. You don't understand, she whispered. You couldn't understand. Then help me understand. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the birth certificate. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he had to strain to hear it. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college. My father had just lost everything, the business, the house, his reputation. My mother was sick. We had nothing, Marcus, nothing. We had each other. Love doesn't pay medical bills. The words came out harsh, bitter. Love doesn't save dying mothers or put food on the table, or… She stopped, pressing her lips together. Richard offered me a life, security, a future. Richard offered you money. Yes. She looked up at him then, her eyes blazing with an old defiance. He offered me money, and I took it, because I was pregnant and scared and 22 years old, and I thought… Her voice broke. I thought if I gave you up, if I gave us up, I could give her everything. Everything I never had. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. You never told me you were pregnant. How could I? You were working 2 jobs just to pay rent. You were saving every penny to put yourself through engineering school. What was I supposed to do? Trap you with a baby you couldn't afford? That wasn't your choice to make. It was the only choice I could make. Elena stood up, pacing to the window again. So I married Richard. Told him the baby was his. Let him believe it all these years. And Sophia? What about her? Does she know? About Richard not being her father? Elena's reflection in the window went very still. We told her she was adopted. When she was old enough to ask questions. Richard and I, it seemed easier. Easier than what? Easier than the truth. Marcus studied her profile against the glass. What truth, Elena? That you chose money over love? That you built your empire on a lie? She whirled around, eyes flashing. I chose survival, Marcus. I chose security for my daughter over romance. And you know what? She had everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, a father who loved her, a father who wasn't her father, a father who was there. Elena's voice cracked. A father who didn't abandon her. I never abandoned anyone. I never got the chance. They stared at each other across the expanse of her office, 23 years of hurt and anger and regret filling the space between them. Outside, Seattle hummed with the noise of a city that never stopped moving, but inside this glass tower, time felt suspended. She found you, Elena said finally. Sophia found you. What did you tell her? The truth. That I loved her mother once. That I never knew she existed. That if I had known. Marcus trailed off, shaking his head. I told her I would have tried to be the father she deserved. And what does she want now? She wants to know why her mother threw away the only real love she ever had for the chance to be rich. Elena flinched as if he'd struck her. She wants to understand how the woman who taught her about integrity and honesty built her life on a lie. Marcus's voice was quiet now, relentless. She wants to know if you ever think about what might have been. Every day, Elena whispered, and the admission seemed to surprise even her. Every single day. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 2 decades of choices that couldn't be undone. Through the glass walls of the office, Marcus could see employees moving through the hallways, living their own smaller dramas, unaware that in this room, an entire world was shifting on its axis. "She's coming here," Marcus said finally. "This afternoon, 3 o'clock. Elena went very still. "What?" "I told her I was going to talk to you first. Give you a chance to. I don't know. Prepare. You had no right. I had every right. She's my daughter too, Elena. Whether you wanted her to be or not." Elena sank back into her chair, her perfectly composed mask finally cracking completely. For a moment, she looked exactly like the 22-year-old girl he'd fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, scared, trying to hold her world together with nothing but stubborn will. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't see her. Not like this, not knowing that she knows." "Knows what?" "That everything I taught her about being strong and independent and honest was just words. That her whole life has been built on lies." Marcus moved closer, his anger finally giving way to something softer. "Elena, she doesn't want your money. She doesn't want explanations or apologies. She just wants to understand the woman who gave birth to her. I'm not that woman anymore. Aren't you?" Elena looked up at him, and for a split second, he saw the girl who used to sneak into his dorm room, who made terrible coffee but never gave up trying to get it right, who dreamed of changing the world instead of owning it. "She's proud of you, you know," Marcus said quietly. "All the things you've built, all the people you employ, all the good you've done with your foundation. She researched everything before she came looking for me. She knows who Elena Whitmore is. But she wants to know who Elena Walsh was." "Yes." Elena closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "What if she hates me? What if she doesn't?" Before Elena could answer, her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Whitmore? There's a young woman here to see you. Says her name is Sophia and that she believes you're expecting her." Elena and Marcus stared at each other across the desk. 23 years of carefully maintained distance collapsed in an instant. "She's early," Marcus said unnecessarily. Elena pressed the intercom button with a shaking finger. "Send her up." The 3 minutes it took for Sophia to reach the 42nd floor felt like a lifetime. Elena stood frozen behind her desk, one hand still pressed to the intercom button, the other clutching the edge of the marble surface so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Marcus remained where he was, watching her with the careful attention of someone who knew that the next few moments would either heal an old wound or tear it open beyond repair. "I can't do this," Elena whispered, more to herself than to him. "You've been doing it for 23 years, Marcus said quietly. "You just didn't know it." The soft chime of the elevator made them both turn toward the glass doors. Through the frosted panels, they could see a figure approaching, young, slight, moving with the kind of determined grace that spoke of nerves held in check by sheer force of will. The door opened. Sophia Rivera stepped into Elena Whitmore's office like she was stepping into a courtroom where she was both the prosecutor and the key witness. She was 23 years old, with dark hair that fell in waves around her shoulders and eyes that held all the intelligence and stubbornness that Marcus had promised. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, clothes that probably cost a tenth of what Elena's outfit did, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that no amount of money could buy. She looked at Marcus first, offering him a small, nervous smile. "Hi, Dad." The word hit the room like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the carefully maintained atmosphere of corporate professionalism. Elena made a sound soft, almost inaudible like someone who'd just been punched in the stomach. "Hi, sweetheart." Marcus said, and his voice was gentle in a way that spoke of 3 weeks spent learning how to be a father to a daughter he'd never known existed. "This is Elena Whitmore," Sophia finished, turning to face the woman behind the desk. "My biological mother." Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She stood there, staring at this young woman who was simultaneously a stranger and the most familiar face in the world. It was like looking at herself through a funhouse mirror, the same features rearranged by time and genetics and 23 years of different choices. "You look," Elena started, then stopped. "I mean, I look like you," Sophia said simply. "Everyone always said I looked like my adoptive mother, but I never saw it. Now I know why." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of 2 decades of missed birthdays, bedtime stories never shared, first days of school that Elena had never witnessed. Sophia took a step closer to the desk, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture that was so exactly like Marcus's that Elena felt her heart skip. "Thank you for seeing me," Sophia said. "I know this must be difficult." Elena almost laughed at the understatement. "Difficult, like calling a hurricane a light breeze." "Please," Elena managed, gesturing toward the sitting area with a hand that trembled only slightly. "Sit, both of you." They arranged themselves in the leather chairs like actors taking their positions for a scene none of them had rehearsed. Elena chose the chair that put her closest to the window, as if she needed the escape route of all that glass and sky. Marcus sat across from her, while Sophia took the chair between them, literally and figuratively occupying the space where 2 lives intersected. "I don't know where to start," Elena said, and it was perhaps the first completely honest thing she'd said since Marcus had walked into her office. "Maybe with why you lied to me my entire life," Sophia said, and though her voice was quiet, the words carried the force of 23 years of questions without answers. Elena flinched. "We didn't lie. We told you that you were adopted. You told me I was adopted by people who loved me so much they couldn't bear to let me go." Sophia's eyes were steady, unflinching. "You told me my birth parents were teenagers who weren't ready to be parents. You told me they made the brave choice to give me a better life." "That's true. Is it?" Sophia leaned forward slightly, and Elena could see Marcus in the set of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. "Because, from what I can tell, my birth mother wasn't a teenager. She was a college graduate who gave me away so she could marry a billionaire." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning for decades. Elena felt something inside her chest crack, not break, but develop one of those hairline fractures that would spread and spread until the whole structure came tumbling down. "It wasn't like that," Elena said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew how hollow they sounded. "Wasn't it?" Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I've done my research, Miss Whitmore. I know that you and my father," she glanced at Marcus, "my biological father, were together for 2 years. I know you lived together. I know you were planning to get married after he finished engineering school." Elena's mouth went dry. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I found the ring." Sophia opened the folder and pulled out a small velvet box, navy blue, worn at the edges, the kind of box that jewelry stores used for engagement rings back when they made them to last forever. She set it on the coffee table between them. "I found it in a box of your things in the storage room. Things from before you married Richard Whitmore. There was also this." She pulled out a photograph faded around the edges, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. It showed a younger Elena and Marcus standing in front of what looked like a Christmas tree, his arms around her waist, her head tilted back as she laughed at something he'd said. They looked impossibly young, impossibly happy, impossibly in love. Elena stared at the photograph like it was evidence of a crime she'd committed, which, in a way, it was. "You kept it," Marcus said quietly, and there was something like wonder in his voice. "I kept everything," Elena whispered, and then looked up sharply, as if surprised she'd admitted it out loud. Sophia was watching her with those dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. You kept everything, but you threw away the life that came with it. You don't understand. Then, help me understand. Sophia's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her carefully maintained composure. Help me understand how the woman who raised me to believe that integrity was the most important thing in the world built her entire life on a lie. Elena stood up suddenly, pacing to the window as if the movement could somehow outrun the conversation. Outside, Seattle sparkled in the afternoon glass and steel and achievement, a city that rewarded those who were strong enough to take what they wanted and smart enough to keep it. My mother was dying, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Cancer. Stage 4. The treatments were experimental, expensive. Insurance wouldn't cover them. She turned back to face the room, and for the first time since Sophia had arrived, she looked directly at her daughter. I was working as a waitress, making barely enough to cover rent. Marcus was putting himself through school, working nights at a construction site just to pay tuition. We had nothing, Sophia. Nothing but love, and love doesn't cure cancer. So you married Richard Whitmore for his money, Sophia said. It wasn't a question. I married Richard because he offered me a way to save the only family I had left. Elena's voice grew stronger, more defiant. Because he promised to pay for my mother's treatments, to take care of everything. Because he was a good man who wanted a family, and she stopped, pressing her lips together. And you were pregnant with someone else's child, Marcus said quietly. Elena's composure cracked completely. I was pregnant and terrified and 22 years old, and I thought God help me. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was giving you, she looked at Sophia, everything I couldn't give you otherwise. The best schools, the best opportunities, a father who could provide for you in ways that Marcus never could. But he wasn't my father, Sophia said. Was he? Elena sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 45 years. No, he wasn't. But he loved you, Sophia. From the moment you were born, he loved you like you were his own flesh and blood. Because he thought I was. Yes. Did you ever tell him the truth? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft they had to lean forward to hear her. He figured it out, when you were about 10 years old. You needed a blood transfusion after that car accident, remember? And neither Richard's blood type nor mine was compatible, but the hospital was able to find a match quickly enough that it didn't matter. But Richard was smart. He knew enough about genetics to put the pieces together. Sophia's face had gone pale. He knew? He knew. And he never said anything. He said everything that mattered. Elena looked up, and there were tears in her eyes now, the first real emotion she'd allowed herself to show. He said that biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Showing up every day does. Being there for every scraped knee and broken heart and graduation and celebration does. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so raw and human that it seemed to strip away 23 years of carefully constructed armor. He said that you were his daughter in every way that mattered, and that nothing, not genetics, not biology, not the circumstances of how you came to be would ever change that. The room fell quiet except for the distant hum of the city below. Sophia sat very still, processing this new information, while Marcus watched Elena with an expression that was part grief, part understanding, part something that might have been forgiveness. He was a good father, Sophia said finally. He was the best father, Elena agreed. And when he died last year, he made me promise him something. What? Elena looked directly at her daughter for the first time since she'd entered the office. He made me promise that if you ever came looking for the truth, I would give it to you, all of it, no matter how much it hurt. Sophia's breath caught. He knew I would come looking? He knew you were smart enough to figure it out eventually, and he knew that someday you'd need to understand where you came from in order to figure out where you were going. Elena reached into her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope cream, colored expensive stationery, with Sophia written across the front in Richard Whitmore's careful handwriting. He wrote this for you before he died. I wasn't supposed to give it to you unless this day came. Sophia took the envelope with shaking hands. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Elena. "What does it say?" "I don't know. He sealed it before he gave it to me." Sophia carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. As she read, her eyes filled with tears, and Marcus found himself leaning forward, as if he could somehow share the weight of whatever Richard Whitmore had felt important enough to say from beyond the grave. "He says," Sophia's voice broke, and she had to start again. "He says that he hoped I would never need to read this letter, but that if I was reading it, it meant I was brave enough to seek the truth. He says that he loved me from the moment I was born, and that nothing about my biology changes that. He says that Elena," she looked up at her mother, "that Elena made the hardest choice a person can make, and that she made it out of love." Elena was crying openly now, no longer trying to hide behind the mask of corporate composure. "He says that Marcus," Sophia turned to look at him, "is a good man who never knew he had a daughter, and that if I found him, I should remember that he missed 23 years of my life through no fault of his own." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of anger and resentment that he'd carried for 3 weeks since Sophia had first walked into his garage. "And he says," Sophia continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "that families aren't just about blood. They're about the people who choose to love you, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when it means letting you go so you can find your way back home." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. When she looked up, there were tears on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "I need to ask you something, Elena, and I need you to tell me the truth." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Do you regret it? Any of it? The choice you made, the life you built, the daughter you gained, but the love you lost?" Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice held 23 years of careful thought, of nights lying awake wondering what if, of moments when she'd catch a glimpse of Sophia's profile and see Marcus in the curve of her nose or the way she laughed. "I regret hurting people I loved," she said finally. "I regret the choices I made out of fear instead of faith. I regret that Marcus never got to know you as a child, and that you never got to know him." She paused, looking from Sophia to Marcus and back again. "But I don't regret that you exist. I don't regret that you grew up strong and smart and kind. And I don't regret that Richard got to be your father, even if I regret how that came to be." It was, perhaps, the most honest thing any of them had said since this conversation began. Sophia nodded slowly, as if Elena's answer had confirmed something she'd already suspected. "There's something else I need to tell you both." She reached back into her folder and pulled out another piece of paper, this one official, looking, with legal letterhead and the kind of formal language that usually preceded life-changing announcements. "I've been accepted to the engineering program at the University of Washington. I start in the fall." Marcus straightened in his chair. "Engineering?" "Structural engineering, specifically, like my biological father." She smiled at him, the first real smile she'd offered since entering the room. "Turns out, some things really are genetic." Elena felt her heart do something complicated in her chest, part pride, part grief, part recognition of a circle completing itself in ways she'd never imagined. "That's wonderful," Elena said, and meant it. "Richard would be so proud." "I know," Sophia said, "but I also know that there are things he couldn't teach me. Things only Marcus can teach me." She turned to face him fully. "I want to get to know you, both of you. I want to understand where I came from so I can figure out where I'm going. But I need you both to understand something." Elena and Marcus waited. "I'm not asking either of you to make up for lost time. I'm not asking you to be the parents you never got to be, or to pretend that the last 23 years didn't happen. I'm asking you to help me figure out who I am now, today, with all the messy, complicated truth of how I got here." She stood up, and for a moment, she looked exactly like Elena had at that determined, slightly defiant, ready to take on the world. "I'm asking if you're willing to try to be family. Not the family we might have been, but the family we can still choose to become." Elena and Marcus looked at each other across the coffee table, across 23 years of hurt and misunderstanding and roads not taken. In Sophia's question, they heard an invitation to something neither of them had dared to hope, for not a second chance, exactly, but a first chance at something entirely new. "Yes," Elena said, her voice steady for the first time all afternoon. "I'd like that very much." "So would I," Marcus agreed. Sophia smiled then a real smile, bright and genuine and full of possibility. "Good, because I was hoping you'd say that." She moved toward the door, then turned back, her hand on the handle. "There's one more thing. I've been thinking about what to call you both. I mean, Elena and Marcus seem too formal, but Mom and Dad belong to other people, other relationships." Elena felt her breath catch. "What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking maybe I could call you both by your names, but differently. Elena could be Mama Elena, like the Spanish mothers do. And Marcus could be Papa Marcus." She paused, suddenly looking younger, more vulnerable. "If that's okay with you both." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes again, but this time they were different, not tears of grief or regret, but something that felt dangerously close to joy. "That's perfect," she whispered. "Perfect," Marcus agreed. Sophia nodded once, decisive, and opened the door. "I'll call you both tomorrow. We can figure out how to do this as we go." She was almost through the door when Elena called after her. "Sophia?" "Yes?" "Your adoptive father, Richard. He would be so proud of the woman you've become." Sophia's smile was soft, understanding. "I know, Mama Elena. I think he would be proud of all of us." And then she was gone, leaving Elena and Marcus alone in the office that had witnessed the unraveling of 23 years of carefully kept secrets. The silence that followed Sophia's departure was different from the one that had preceded her arrival, where before there had been tension and the weight of 23 years of unspoken truths. Now there was something else, a strange kind of peace, fragile and new, like the first green shoots pushing through concrete. Elena remained standing by the door where Sophia had left them, her hand still pressed against the glass, as if she could somehow hold on to the moment before it slipped away. Marcus sat forward in his chair, his elbows on his knees, staring at the empty space where their daughter had been. "Mama Elena," Elena said softly, testing the words. They felt foreign on her tongue, but also right in a way that surprised her. "Papa Marcus?" Marcus echoed, and there was wonder in his voice. "I never thought. I mean, I hoped, but I never dared to think." Elena turned from the door, and for the first time since he'd walked into her office, she really looked at him. Not at the ghost of the boy she'd once loved, not at the reminder of choices she'd made and unmade, but at the man he'd become. He was broader now, his shoulders filling out the work shirt in a way that spoke of physical labor and honest sweat. His hair was still thick, but touched with gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many sunrises. His hands she'd always loved, his hands were marked with calluses and small scars, the hands of someone who built things, who fixed things, who made the world work. "You're different," she said, and it wasn't an accusation, just an observation. "So are you." Elena looked down at herself, the tailored suit, the expensive shoes, the manicured nails that had never known a day of real work. "I suppose I am." She moved away from the door, but instead of returning to her desk or the formal sitting area, she found herself walking to the windows that made up the western wall of her office. Seattle spread out below them, all glass and steel and ambition, the city that had made her fortune and in many ways had made her who she was. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked, not turning around. "About what might have been?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally answered, his voice was thoughtful, careful. "Every day for the first 10 years. Less often after that, but yes, sometimes. What do you think would have happened? If I'd stayed? If I'd told you about the baby? If we'd tried to make it work? I don't know." Marcus stood up, joining her at the window but maintaining a careful distance. "Maybe we would have struggled. Maybe we would have been poor but happy. Maybe we would have loved each other and Sophia so much that nothing else mattered. Elena closed her eyes. Or maybe we would have resented each other. Maybe you would have blamed me for trapping you, for keeping you from finishing school. Maybe I would have blamed you for not being able to provide for us. Maybe. Maybe the baby would have suffered for our choices. Maybe she would have grown up without opportunities, without advantages, without lies? Elena flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? Marcus turned to face her, and she could see her own reflection in his eyes. Elena, I'm not saying you made the wrong choice. I'm not even saying I would have made a different one in your position. But let's not pretend that what you chose was without cost. I know what it cost, Elena said quietly. It cost me you. It cost us both 23 years with our daughter. Elena felt something break inside her chest knot, the sharp crack of sudden pain, but the slow, inevitable crumbling of a wall she'd built to protect herself from exactly this conversation. I know, she whispered. I know what I did. I know what I lost. I know what I stole from all of us. I'm not trying to punish you, Elena. Aren't you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face. No, he said finally. I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying to understand how the woman I loved, the woman who used to cry during sad movies and who once spent her last $20 on birthday presents for my nephews, became someone who could build a fortune on a foundation of lies. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what changed me? What turned Elena Walsh into Elena Whitmore? Yes. Elena moved to her desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a manila folder that looked exactly like the one Sophia had carried. She handed it to Marcus. Go ahead, open it. Marcus hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were medical records, hospital bills, insurance forms, dozens of them, all bearing the name Margaret Walsh, and dates from 24 years ago. My mother, Elena explained, watching his face as he flipped through the papers. Look at the totals. Marcus found the summary page and his breath caught. The total amount owed was over $200,000, an impossible sum for a 22-year-old waitress and her dying mother. This is what love cost, Marcus. This is what choosing to stay with you would have meant, watching my mother die, because we couldn't afford to save her. Elena took the folder back, holding it against her chest like armor. Richard paid every penny of this. The experimental treatments, the private room, the round-the-clock care. He gave my mother 6 more months of life, and he gave them to her with dignity. And all it cost was your soul, Marcus said quietly. Elena's eyes flashed. My soul? My soul was already gone, Marcus. It died the night I realized that love wasn't enough to save the people who mattered most. So you chose money instead. I chose survival. I chose pragmatism. I chose to live in the real world instead of some romantic fantasy where love conquers all. Marcus set the medical records on her desk, his movements careful and deliberate. And how did that work out for you, Elena? All that pragmatism, all that survival? Are you happy? The question hit her like a physical blow. Elena opened her mouth to answer too, give him the speech. She'd rehearsed 1,000 times about success and achievement, and building something that mattered, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself thinking about mornings when she woke up in a bed the size of most people's entire bedrooms, in a house that could have sheltered a dozen families, and felt completely and utterly alone. She thought about board meetings where she wielded power that could change thousands of lives with a single decision, and how empty that power felt when she came home to silence. She thought about charity galas and society events where she was surrounded by hundreds of people and still felt like she was suffocating from loneliness. I built something, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I built an empire. I employed thousands of people. I gave millions to charity. I made a difference. But are you happy? Elena sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. I was content. Before today, I was content. And now? Now I don't know what I am. Marcus moved closer to her desk, but instead of sitting in one of the chairs opposite her, he perched on the edge of the marble surface, a casual gesture that somehow made the enormous office feel smaller, more intimate. Can I tell you something? He said. Elena nodded. I hated you for about 10 years. After you married Richard, after I realized you'd chosen him over me, I hated you with a passion that scared me sometimes. I would lie awake at night, imagining all the ways I could hurt you, all the things I could say if I ever saw you again. Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Marcus, let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. After 10 years, the hate started to fade, and I realized something. I wasn't angry at you for leaving me. I was angry at myself for not being the kind of man you felt you could depend on. That's not. It is, though, isn't it? You didn't trust me enough to tell me you were pregnant. You didn't trust me enough to let me try to figure out how to provide for you and the baby. You didn't trust me enough to believe that we could have found a way. Elena was crying openly now, tears she'd held back for 23 years, finally breaking free. I was scared, Marcus. I was so scared. I know. But you were also 22 years old and making decisions that would affect the rest of our lives based on that fear. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From being trapped. From having to give up your dreams. From resenting me and the baby for ruining your life. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. Elena, do you know what I've been doing for the last 23 years? She looked up at him through her tears, not trusting herself to speak. I've been working construction, building things, bridges mostly. And do you know why I chose bridges? Elena shook her head. Because bridges connect things that are meant to be together. They span impossible distances. They make it possible for people to reach each other across gaps that seem insurmountable. He paused. I spent 23 years building bridges, Elena, and thinking about the one I never got the chance to build to you. The admission hung between them like a bridge itself fragile, but real, spanning the distance between who they had been and who they might still become. I would have chosen you, Marcus said quietly. If you had told me about the baby, if you had given me the chance, I would have chosen you, both of you. Every time. Elena pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed by the weight of 23 years of what-ifs and might-have-beens. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. I know. I destroyed everything. I destroyed us. I destroyed your chance to know Sophia as a child. I destroyed, Elena. Marcus's voice cut through her spiral of self-recrimination. Look at me. She lowered her hands, meeting his eyes. You didn't destroy everything. Sophia is alive. She's brilliant and strong and kind. She grew up with advantages neither of us could have given her. She had a father who loved her unconditionally, even after he knew the truth. She had opportunities that led her to become the remarkable woman who walked into this office today. But the cost was high, for all of us. But maybe the price we paid was worth what Sophia gained. Elena stared at him, trying to process the possibility of forgiveness in his words. How can you say that? How can you not hate me? Marcus slid off the desk and moved around to her side, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. It was the closest they'd been in 23 years, and Elena could smell the soap he used, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes that she'd memorized a lifetime ago. Because Sophia asked us to be family, he said simply. Not the family we might have been, but the family we can choose to become. And you can't build a family on hatred, Elena. You can only build it on forgiveness. Elena looked into his eyes and saw not the angry young man who had been abandoned, not the bitter construction worker who had spent years wondering what if, but a father who had met his daughter for the first time 3 weeks ago and was willing to do whatever it took to build a relationship with her. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be Mama Elena to a daughter who's 23 years old. I don't know how to be whatever we're supposed to be to each other now. Neither do I, Marcus admitted. But I think that's okay. I think we're supposed to figure it out as we go. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She's remarkable, isn't she, Sophia? She is. And she's ours, Elena. Somehow, despite everything we did wrong, she's ours. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, not healing. Exactly, but the beginning of healing. The first tentative steps toward forgiveness, both of Marcus and of herself. Marcus? Yeah? When Sophia calls tomorrow, when she wants to start figuring out how to be family, I'd like you to be part of that. Not just as her father, but as, I don't know what we are to each other now, but whatever it is, I'd like us to figure it out together. Marcus smiled, and for a moment she could see the boy she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I'd like that too. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun begin to set over Seattle. The city sparkled below them, full of light and life and possibility. There's something else, Elena said eventually. What's that? The engagement ring, the one Sophia found. Marcus's expression grew carefully neutral. What about it? I want you to have it back. Elena stood up and moved to her desk, opening the bottom drawer again. From beneath the medical files, she pulled out the small velvet box that Sophia had placed on the coffee table earlier. You should have this, she said, holding it out to him. It belongs to you. Marcus stared at the box but didn't take it. Elena, I gave that to you 23 years ago. It's been yours ever since. But I kept it, but I never. She struggled to find the words. It deserves to mean something. To someone. Someday. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then gently pushed the box back toward her. Keep it, he said quietly. Maybe someday Sophia will want it. Maybe she'll want to know that her parents once loved each other enough to dream about forever. Elena felt her breath catch. You think she'd want it? I think she'd want to know that she came from love, even if that love took a different path than we expected. Elena nodded, closing her fingers around the small box. Okay, I'll keep it for her. Good. Marcus stood up, and Elena realized that this strange, painful, wonderful afternoon was coming to an end. In a few minutes, he would walk out of her office and back into his life, and she would be left alone with her thoughts and her regrets and the beginning of something that might, eventually, be hope. Marcus? He turned back from the door. Yeah? Thank you for giving me the chance to know her, for bringing her to me. She brought herself, Elena. I just opened the door. Still, thank you. Marcus nodded, then paused, his hand on the door handle. Elena, tomorrow, when Sophia calls, when we start figuring out how to be family, we're going to make mistakes. All of us. We're going to say the wrong things and disappoint each other and probably hurt each other's feelings. Elena felt her heart skip. I know. But we're going to keep trying. Because that's what families do. They keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when they don't know what they're doing. Even when they've made terrible choices? Especially then. Elena smiled through her tears. I can do that. I can keep showing up. Good, because Sophia deserves parents who show up, both of them. She does. Marcus opened the door, then turned back one last time. Elena? Yes? I'm glad it's you. I'm glad that if I had to miss 23 years of my daughter's life, she spent those years with someone who loved her as much as you do. And then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in her office with the fading light of a Seattle sunset and the beginning of something she'd never dared to hope for, a second chance at being the mother Sophia deserved, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to forgive herself for the choices that had brought them all to this moment. She walked to the window and looked out at the city she'd helped build, the empire she'd created from nothing but ambition and fear, and the desperate need to prove that she was strong enough to survive anything. For the first time in 23 years, survival didn't feel like enough. For the first time in 23 years, she wanted to live. 3 months later, Elena stood in the parking lot of a Home Depot in Ballard, staring at a text message from Sophia that read, Papa Marcus is teaching me how to build a bookshelf. Want to come watch me fail spectacularly at using power tools? The invitation was casual, light, the kind of thing daughters sent to mothers every day. But for Elena, it represented something monumental, not just inclusion in Sophia's life, but inclusion in the ordinary, everyday moments that she'd missed for 23 years. She typed back, On my way, and for the first time in decades, left work early without a crisis to justify it. Marcus's garage was exactly what she'd expected: organized chaos. every tool in its place but dust and sawdust, coating everything like a fine layer of evidence that real work happened here. The smell hit her first motor oil and metal shavings and something indefinably masculine that took her back to college, to lazy Saturday mornings when Marcus would tinker with his ancient motorcycle while she read on the front steps of their apartment, "Mama Elena." Sophia's voice carried across the garage, bright with genuine pleasure. "You made it!" Elena picked her way carefully across the concrete floor, stepping around extension cords and toolboxes, feeling overdressed in her work clothes, but not caring. Sophia stood at a workbench that was clearly Marcus's domain, wearing safety glasses that were too big for her face and holding a piece of sandpaper like it might bite her. "How's it going?" Elena asked, kissing Sophia's cheek, a gesture that had become natural over the past 3 months, though it still made her heart skip a little each time. "Well, I haven't electrocuted myself or chopped off any fingers, so Papa Marcus says I'm ahead of the curve." Marcus emerged from behind a cabinet, wiping his hands on a rag. "She's being modest. Look at this." He gestured to the workbench where the beginnings of a bookshelf lay in various stages of assembly. The wood was smooth and straight, the joints clean and precise. It was clearly the work of someone who knew what they were doing, but Elena could see Sophia's touches in the careful attention to detail, the extra sanding that spoke of someone who wanted to get it exactly right. "It's beautiful," Elena said, and meant it. "It's for my apartment," Sophia explained, pulling off the safety glasses and leaving her hair sticking up at odd angles. "My first real bookshelf that isn't made of milk crates and plywood." Elena felt a familiar pang, another milestone she'd missed, another first that belonged to someone else. But over the past 3 months, she'd learned to recognize these moments of grief for what they were and let them pass without drowning in them. "What kind of books are you planning to put on it?" Elena asked. "Engineering textbooks, mostly, but also some poetry, some fiction. Richard's collection of first editions that he left me." Sophia paused, glancing between Elena and Marcus. "And maybe some photo albums, if I can convince my parents to help me put together a proper family history." The word parents, plural, encompassing both of them, still sent a little thrill through Elena's chest. Over the past 3 months, they'd developed a rhythm, the 3 of them. Sunday dinners at Sophia's apartment, where Elena brought takeout from expensive restaurants and Marcus brought dessert from whatever bakery was closest to the construction site where he was working. Occasional coffee dates, where Sophia would update them on her classes, and they would try to navigate the delicate balance of being supportive without being overwhelming. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still conversations that hit unexpectedly painful territory, still the weight of 23 years that couldn't be erased or forgotten. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that felt like more than Elena had dared to hope for. "I brought something," Elena said, pulling a manila envelope from her purse. "If you want them." Sophia wiped her hands on Marcus's rag and opened the envelope carefully. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, chronicling Elena's pregnancy and Sophia's first few months of life. Elena holding her newborn daughter in the hospital. Richard beaming as he fed a tiny Sophia a bottle. The 3 of them at Sophia's first Christmas, looking like any normal, happy family. "I had copies made," Elena explained, watching Sophia's face as she flipped through the images. I thought you might want to know what those early days looked like." Sophia stopped at a picture of Elena asleep in a hospital bed, baby Sophia curled on her chest, both of them looking peaceful and complete. "You look so young," she said softly. "I felt ancient," Elena admitted. "Like I'd aged 10 years in the 9 months I carried you." "Was it hard?" "Being pregnant, knowing." Elena glanced at Marcus, who was pretending to organize tools while clearly listening to every word. They'd all gotten better at these conversations over the past 3 months, but they were still careful with each other, still learning what was safe territory and what might detonate without warning. "It was the most beautiful and most terrifying time of my life," Elena said honestly. "Every day I felt you growing inside me, and every day I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if the choices I was making were the ones you would want me to make." "And now?" Sophia asked. "Now that you know me, Now that you can see how everything turned out, do you think you made the right choices? It was the question that haunted Elena's quiet moments, the one she'd been afraid Sophia would ask and afraid she wouldn't. Over the past 3 months, as she'd watched her daughter navigate engineering courses with the same fierce intelligence she'd once applied to everything else, as she'd seen the easy affection between Sophia and Marcus bloom into something real and lasting, Elena had wondered the same thing. "I think I made the only choices I knew how to make at the time," Elena said carefully, "and I think I hope that those choices led to you becoming the remarkable woman you are today." "That's not really an answer," Sophia said, but she was smiling. "It's the only answer I have." Marcus looked up from the tool bench where he'd been pretending to work. "Can I say something?" Both women turned to him. "I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about choices and consequences and what we owe each other." He set down the wrench he'd been holding and moved closer to them. "And I think maybe we're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "I mean, instead of asking whether the choices we made 23 years ago were right or wrong, maybe we should be asking whether the choices we're making now are right." Sophia tilted her head, considering. "Like what?" "Like choosing to be honest with each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Like choosing to show up, even when we don't know what we're doing. Like choosing to build something new instead of trying to fix something that's been broken for 23 years. Elena felt something shift in her chest knot, the sharp pain of regret that had become so familiar, but something softer, something that felt like hope. "I like that," Sophia said. "I like the idea that we get to choose who we are to each other, starting from now." "So do I," Elena agreed. Marcus smiled, and Elena was struck again by how much he'd changed, not just physically, but in the way he carried himself, the way he moved through the world with a quiet confidence that spoke of a man who'd found his place in it. "In that case," he said, "I have a choice I'd like to make." "What's that?" Sophia asked. Marcus walked to a cabinet on the far side of the garage and pulled out a manila folder that looked exactly like the ones Elena and Sophia had carried into his life 3 months ago. "I've been working on something, a project, and I'd like to share it with both of you." He opened the folder and pulled out architectural drawings, detailed, professional-looking blueprints that showed the layout for what appeared to be a small house. "It's a cabin," he explained, spreading the drawings across the workbench. "Up on Whidbey Island. I bought some land there about 10 years ago, always planned to build something on it someday. A place to get away from the city, somewhere quiet." Elena studied the drawings, recognizing the careful attention to detail that had always characterized Marcus's work. The cabin was small but thoughtfully designed, with large windows that would frame views of Puget Sound and a wraparound porch that invited long summer evenings. "It's beautiful," she said, "but why are you showing us?" Marcus looked at Sophia, then at Elena, then back at the drawings. "Because I'd like it to be a place where we can all go, together, a place that belongs to all of us, where Sophia can bring friends from school, where we can have family dinners that don't require takeout containers, where we can," he trailed off, suddenly looking uncertain, "where we can learn how to be family without the rest of the world watching." Sophia reached out and touched one of the drawings, tracing the outline of what Marcus had labeled as the main living area. "You want us to help you build it?" "I want us to build it together, all of us. I'll do the structural work, the electrical, the plumbing. But I'd like Sophia to help with the engineering, make sure I'm not making any mistakes that will bring the whole thing down. And Elena," he looked at her, "I'd like you to help with everything else, the design, the fixtures, the details that make a house a home." Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Marcus, I don't know anything about building houses. I live in a place that came with an interior designer and a staff to maintain it." "You know about creating spaces where people want to be," Marcus said. "You know about making things beautiful and functional and lasting. That's all a home really is." Elena looked at the drawings again, imagining the three of them working side by side, learning each other's rhythms, building something together that would outlast all of them. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely outside anything she'd ever imagined for herself. "How long would it take?" she asked. 2 years, maybe 3, working weekends and vacations. Longer if we want to take our time and do it right. And you want all of us to be involved, even though we still barely know each other? Even though we're still figuring out how to be in the same room without it being awkward? Marcus smiled. Especially because of that. I think maybe the best way to learn how to be family is to build something together. Something real, something permanent, something that will be there long after we're all gone. Sophia looked up from the drawings, her eyes bright with excitement. I love it. I love the idea of creating something that's ours, that comes from all of us working together. Elena? Marcus asked. What do you think? Elena stared at the blueprints, thinking about the life she'd built for herself, all glass and steel and isolation, all carefully controlled environments where nothing was left to chance and nothing could surprise her. The cabin Marcus was proposing would be the opposite of everything she'd surrounded herself with for 23 years. It would be messy and unpredictable and full of the kind of complicated human connection that she'd spent decades learning to avoid. It would be terrifying. It would be perfect. Yes, she said, her voice steady and sure. Yes, I'd love to help you build it. Sophia let out a whoop of joy and threw her arms around both of them, pulling them into an awkward three-way hug that somehow felt like the most natural thing in the world. When do we start? She asked, her voice muffled against Marcus's shoulder. Spring, Marcus said. After the weather clears up and you finish your first year of classes, we'll start with clearing the land, laying the foundation. Literally building from the ground up, Elena said, and there was something symbolic in that that made her chest feel tight with emotion. Exactly. They separated from the hug, but remained close. The three of them clustered around the workbench, studying the drawings like generals planning a campaign. Elena found herself thinking about the photograph Sophia had found, the one of her and Marcus in front of the Christmas tree, young and happy and in love. They weren't those people anymore, could never be those people again. But maybe they could be these people, older, wiser, scarred by the choices they'd made but still capable of building something beautiful together. There's one more thing, Marcus said, and something in his voice made both women look up. About the cabin, about what it represents. What do you mean? Sophia asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I want it to be a place where we can all be honest with each other, where we can talk about the hard things, the complicated things, the things that still hurt, where we don't have to pretend that the last 23 years didn't happen, but where we also don't have to be defined by them. Elena felt her breath catch. Marcus, I'm not saying we need to hash out every detail of what went wrong, or spend years in therapy trying to fix things that can't be fixed. I'm just saying that if we're going to build something together, a cabin, a family, a future, then we need to build it on truth. All of it. The good, the bad, and the complicated. Sophia nodded slowly. You mean like how I still sometimes feel angry that I grew up not knowing either of you were my real parents? Or how I sometimes feel guilty for loving Richard so much when I know it hurts both of you to hear about it? Exactly like that, Marcus said gently. Elena took a shaky breath. Or like how I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too scared to trust it? Or how I still sometimes wonder if I would have been a good father to you if I'd had the chance, Marcus added, looking at Sophia, or if I would have just made everything worse. The garage fell quiet except for the distant sounds of traffic and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Elena realized that this was what Marcus had been talking about, this moment of raw honesty that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. I think, Sophia said slowly, that maybe part of building something together is accepting that we're all going to bring our baggage to the construction site, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to pretend we don't have baggage, but to figure out how to build something strong enough to hold all of it. Elena looked at her daughter, this remarkable young woman who had somehow emerged from 23 years of lies and half-truths with more wisdom than Elena had managed to accumulate in twice as many years, and felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Pride. Not the careful, controlled satisfaction of a business deal well executed or a strategic goal achieved, but the fierce, overwhelming pride of a mother watching her child become exactly who they were meant to be. "You're right," Elena said. "You're absolutely right." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since they'd all been reunited, Elena saw no trace of the hurt or anger or regret that had shadowed his eyes for months. Just affection and hope and the beginning of something that looked like peace. "So we're really doing this?" he asked. "All of us? Together?" "We're really doing this," Sophia confirmed. "We're really doing this," Elena agreed. And as they stood there in Marcus's garage, surrounded by the tools and materials of his trade, studying the blueprints for a cabin that didn't exist yet but somehow already felt like home, Elena realized that for the first time in 23 years, she was exactly where she belonged. Not because it was easy or comfortable or familiar, but because it was real, because it was honest, because it was Levinot, the desperate, consuming love of her youth, but something deeper and more durable, something that could survive mistakes and misunderstandings and the complicated realities of being human, something worth building on, something worth building toward, something worth building together. Outside, the Seattle evening was settling over the city like a blanket, all soft light and gentle shadows. But inside the garage, under the harsh fluorescent lights, 3 people who had found their way back to each other were planning their future, one blueprint at a time. 2 years later, Elena stood on the wraparound porch of the cabin they'd built together, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. The water caught the light like scattered coins, and somewhere in the distance, a ferry moved slowly across the horizon, carrying its cargo of lives and stories toward destinations she could only imagine. Behind her, through the screen door, she could hear Sophia and Marcus debating the merits of different wood stains for the bookshelf. They'd finally finished the same one they'd started in his garage all those months ago. Their voices carried the easy rhythm of people who'd learned to disagree without it meaning anything, who'd discovered that love could survive differences of opinion about the small things because it was built on agreement about the big ones. Elena wrapped her hands around the coffee mug Marcus had made for her, a simple ceramic piece, slightly lopsided, with Mama Elena painted on the side in Sophia's careful script. It was nothing like the bone china she drank from in her downtown penthouse, but she'd never owned anything more precious. The cabin itself was exactly what Marcus had promised, small but perfect, every detail crafted with the kind of attention that came from building something you planned to keep forever. The walls were lined with windows that framed views of water and sky, and the rooms flowed into each other with an easy grace that invited conversation and connection. It smelled like sawdust and coffee and the lavender soap Sophia had insisted on for the guest bathroom. It smelled like home. "Mama Elena?" Sophia's voice carried through the screen door. "Can you settle an argument for us?" Elena smiled, setting down her coffee and heading back inside. She found them standing beside the bookshelf, which now occupied a place of honor in the main living area. It was beautiful rich walnut with clean lines and shelves that were already filled with the eclectic mix Sophia had promised. Engineering textbooks shared space with poetry collections, and Richard's first editions sat next to paperback novels with broken spines that spoke of being read and reread with love. "What's the argument?" Elena asked. "Papa Marcus thinks we should seal the wood with a clear coat," Sophia explained. "I think we should use a stain that brings out the grain." Elena studied the bookshelf, running her fingers along the smooth surface. Over the past 2 years, she'd learned to see wood the way Marcus did, not just as a material, but as something alive, with its own character and personality. This particular piece of walnut had a grain that swooped and curved like water, and she could see why Sophia wanted to enhance it. "What do you think, Marcus?" she asked. "If we stain it, will it hide the natural beauty or reveal it?" Marcus considered the question with the seriousness he brought to all matters of craftsmanship. "Depends on the stain. A good one will enhance what's already there. A bad one will cover it up." "Then we use a good one," Elena said simply. "Sophia's right. The grain is too beautiful to hide." Sophia grinned triumphantly, and Marcus shook his head with mock defeat. Ganging up on me. I should have seen this coming when I agreed to build a cabin with two strong-willed women. You love it, Sophia said, bumping his shoulder affectionately. I do, Marcus agreed, and the admission was so honest and complete that Elena felt her heart skip. They worked together for another hour, applying the stain with careful, even strokes, while the evening light faded outside the windows. Elena found herself thinking about all the projects they'd completed over the past 2 years, the deck they'd built last summer, the garden they'd planted last spring, the countless small repairs and improvements that had turned Marcus's blueprints into this real, solid, beautiful place. Each project had been a lesson in collaboration, in patience, in the art of building something that would last. They'd learned each other's working styles, their strengths and weaknesses, their tendency to be perfectionists about different things. Elena had discovered that she was surprisingly good with details, with the small touches that made a space feel finished. Marcus was the steady presence who could solve any structural problem, who could look at a challenge and immediately see 3 different ways to approach it. And Sophia brought innovation, an engineer's mind that could improve on even Marcus's careful plans. But more than that, each project had been a conversation sometimes spoken, sometimes not, about who they were becoming as a family, about forgiveness and acceptance, and the complicated joy of learning to love people exactly as they were, not as you'd imagined they might be. There, Sophia said, setting down her brush and stepping back to admire their work. Perfect. The bookshelf gleamed in the lamplight, the stain bringing out every curve and whirl of the grain, exactly as she'd predicted. It looked like it had always belonged in this room, like it had grown there rather than been built. It really is perfect, Elena agreed. Richard would have loved it. She'd gotten better at mentioning him over the past 2 years, at including his memory in their conversations, without it feeling like a betrayal of anyone. Marcus had helped with that, had been the one to suggest that they hang one of Richard's photographs in the cabina black and white shot of the Seattle waterfront that captured the city's beauty without its noise. He would have, Sophia agreed. He always said that the best furniture was made by people who loved both the work and the people they were making it for. Smart man, Marcus said quietly, and Elena knew he meant it. Over the past 2 years, Marcus had made peace with Richard's role in their story, had come to see him not as the man who stole Elena away, but as the man who loved Sophia when she needed it most. I have something for you both, Elena said suddenly, the words coming out before she'd consciously decided to speak them. She disappeared into the bedroom she'd claimed as her own, the smallest one, with a single window that looked out toward the mainland, and returned with an envelope that had been sitting on her dresser for the past 3 weeks. What is it? Sophia asked. Elena handed her the envelope, watching as she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of official-looking paper. Sophia's eyes widened as she read, and she looked up at Elena with an expression of shock. You sold Whitmore Industries? I sold my stake in it, Elena corrected. To my business partner. She's been wanting to buy me out for years, and I finally decided it was time. Marcus frowned. Elena, you didn't have to. I didn't do it for you. Elena interrupted gently. I did it for me. I did it because I realized that I've spent the last 25 years building something that was supposed to prove I could survive on my own, and I don't need to prove that anymore. She moved to the window, looking out at the water that had become as familiar as her own reflection. I did it because I want to spend my time building things that matter, things that last, things that bring people together instead of keeping them apart. What will you do? Sophia asked, her voice soft with concern. Elena smiled, turning back to face them. I'm going to teach. The University of Washington offered me a position in their business school professor of entrepreneurship. I'd be working with students who are just starting out, who are trying to figure out how to build something meaningful with their lives. Elena, that's wonderful, Marcus said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. And, Elena continued, feeling suddenly nervous about the next part, I'm going to write a book about second chances, about the cost of success, about what it means to build a life versus building a fortune. About us? Sophia asked. About all of us. about the choices we make when we're young and scared, and the choices we get to make when we're older and wiser, about how it's never too late to start over, as long as you're brave enough to be honest about where you've been. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out the small velvet box that had started this entire journey, the engagement ring that Marcus had given her, a lifetime ago, that she'd kept through everything that came after. "There's one more thing," she said, holding out the box to Sophia. "This belongs to you now." Sophia took the box with shaking hands, opening it to reveal the ring inside a simple solitaire, nothing fancy, but beautiful in its honesty. "Mama Elena, I can't take this. It's yours." "No," Elena said firmly. "It was mine. But it was always meant to be a symbol of love that lasts, of commitment that survives whatever life throws at it. And that's what you represent now, love, that found a way to survive 23 years of separation, commitment that brought a family back together despite everything that tried to keep them apart." Sophia looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Your mother's right. That ring was always about hope for the future, not regret about the past. But what if I never get married? What if I never find someone I want to share it with?" Elena smiled, thinking about all the different forms love could take, all the ways people could choose to build families and futures together. "Then you'll know it's waiting for you when you're ready. And if that day never comes, you'll know it's still yours, a reminder that you came from love, even when that love took unexpected forms." Sophia closed the box carefully and slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you, both of you, for everything." The three of them stood there in the living room of their cabin, surrounded by the evidence of 2 years of work and patience and learning how to be family. Outside, full darkness had settled over the island, and the water had disappeared into the night. But inside, the lamps cast warm circles of light that made everything feel safe and permanent and real. "I should head back to the city," Elena said eventually. "I have that faculty meeting tomorrow morning." "Stay," Sophia said impulsively. "Both of you. Let's have one of our Sunday dinners, even though it's Saturday. Let's cook something instead of ordering takeout. Let's sit on the porch and tell stories until we're too tired to keep our eyes open." Elena looked at Marcus, who shrugged with the easy smile she'd come to love all over again, different from the boy's smile she remembered, but deeper, more complicated, carrying the weight of everything they'd all survived. "I don't have anywhere else I need to be," he said. "Neither do I," Elena realized, and it was true. For the first time in decades, she had nowhere else she needed to be. No urgent meetings or critical decisions waiting for her attention. She had only this moment, this place, these people who had somehow become her whole world. "Then let's cook," Sophia said, clapping her hands together. "Papa Marcus, you're in charge of the grill. Mama Elena, you're on salad duty. I'll handle everything else." "You're not old enough to be in charge of everything else," Elena protested. But she was already moving toward the kitchen. "I'm 25 years old," Sophia called after her. "I think I can handle making pasta without adult supervision." 25, Elena repeated wonderingly. "When did that happen?" "While we were building a cabin," Marcus said, joining her at the kitchen sink. "While we were learning how to be family, while we were figuring out that love isn't something you fall into once and then either keep or lose forever." Elena looked at him, this man who had loved her when they were both too young to know what love cost, who had forgiven her when she'd finally learned. "What is it then?" "Love is something you choose," Marcus said simply. "Every day, in 100 small ways. You choose to show up, to be honest, to keep building even when the foundation feels shaky." Elena nodded, thinking about all the ways they'd chosen each other over the past 2 years. Not the desperate, consuming choice of their youth, but something steadier. Something that could weather disappointments and disagreements and the ordinary challenges of trying to build something lasting. "I love you," she said, the words coming out easily, without the weight of history or expectation. "Both of you. I love the family we've become." "I love you too," Marcus said, and Sophia called from the stove. "I love you both, even though you're being disgustingly sentimental while I'm trying to cook." Elena laughed, the sound carrying through the cabin and out into the night, where it mixed with the sound of water against the shore and the distant call of night birds settling into their roosts. This was what she'd been trying to build her entire life, she realized. Not an empire or a fortune or a reputation that would outlast her, but Thesa, place where people chose to love each other day after day, despite their flaws and failures, and the complicated histories that had brought them together. A place where honesty was more valuable than success, where forgiveness was more powerful than perfection, where the simple act of showing up was enough to transform lives. A place that felt like home. Outside, the stars emerged one by one over Puget Sound, ancient light, traveling impossible distances to illuminate the cabin where three people who had found their way back to each other were making dinner and making peace and making the kind of memories that would last long after the stars themselves had burned out. In the morning, they would return to their separate lives, Elena to her teaching, Marcus to his bridges, Sophia to her studies. But they would carry this night with them, and all the nights like it that stretched ahead into a future none of them could have imagined when this story began. A future built on the solid foundation of love chosen daily, forgiveness offered freely, and truth spoken without fear. A future that belonged to all of them, together. Elena stood on the porch one last time before heading to bed, breathing in the salt air and the scent of the roses Sophia had planted along the walkway. Somewhere in the distance, a fairy horn sounded lonely and lovely, a voice calling across the darkness to anyone who might be listening. She listened, and she was home.